Have you ever stopped and thought, what it'd be like if you could just walk up to a tree and have a conversation with it? I mean, really, what kind of stories do you think they'd tell us?
Oh, wow. That's really something to think about, isn't it? Trees, some of them have been around for hundreds of years. They've seen so much.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's so cool about this English lesson we're diving into. It's only 20 minutes long, but it really gets you thinking about talking trees. It uses all this vocabulary and tells stories, and even has you do a little role playing.
And what's really neat is how it uses that imagination thing to help you learn the language. Like maybe if we start picturing trees talking, we might start understanding what they're already trying to tell us, you know?
It's kind of like how some cultures already see trees, right? I was reading about the ancient Celts and their tree gods, or the Japanese and how they do forest bathing. It's all about connecting with nature on a deep level.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like we're tapping into something we all have inside us, that desire to understand the natural world around us.
So, okay, this lesson has a story in it called A Conversation with an Oak Tree. And the author uses some really awesome words to describe this tree, like majestic oak, centuries old, roots stretching deep. You can practically see this tree.
It's true. Those words really make a difference. They're not just describing the tree. They're making you feel something about it, right?
Yeah.
You get a sense of how wise and how old this oak tree is.
Yeah, I noticed that too. It's they want us to see this tree as something more than just a tree, maybe a wise old being or something.
Exactly. And that idea really comes through in the story itself. So the oak tree starts sharing memories, like how it took care of a family of birds and provided shade to tired travelers and watched kids playing in its branches. It's like this beautiful picture of how the tree is connected to everything around it.
It really gets you thinking about all the things a tree must see in its lifetime.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just always there watching everything go by.
It reminds us that trees aren't just background scenery. They're a really important part of the whole ecosystem.
And the oak tree in the story, it actually has a message for the person who's listening. It talks about how important it is to be gentle and caring and to live in harmony with nature.
It's a powerful message, especially these days when protecting the environment is so crucial. It's like if we try to see things from the tree's point of view, maybe we'll start to get how important that balance is.
Totally. So this lesson also goes into vocabulary, and there are some really cool words in there, like canopy, whisper, murmur, thrive. I mean, they all paint this amazing picture of the forest.
Those words are carefully chosen, take canopy, for instance. It's not just about the top of the forest, it's also about the feeling of shelter it provides, how everything is connected up there.
It's like they're trying to make us feel like we're right there in the forest with the tree,
Exactly. And when you learn those words, you start to appreciate nature in a whole new way.
It's funny how learning new words can do that.
Yeah. Language has a lot of power, doesn't it? It shapes how we see the world.
So this lesson, it goes on to show these sample dialogues where people are actually talking to trees and asking them for advice.
That's a really clever way to get people practicing the language and thinking creatively. When you imagine talking to a tree, you have to think outside the box,
It's like we forget that nature can teach us so much if we just take the time to listen.
And speaking of listening, the lesson also has this role-playing activity where you get to imagine your own conversation with a tree.
Oh, that's a great idea. So it's like taking everything you've learned and putting it into action.
And it makes you think, what would I even ask a tree? What kind of wisdom am I looking for?
Right. What could a tree teach us about ourselves and how we live our lives?
Exactly. It makes you really think about things from a different perspective.
It's almost like, that saying, if a tree falls in a forest and no one's around, does it make a sound? But what if they've been talking this whole time and we're just not hearing them?
Wow. Yeah, that's a good question. You ever think about how long some trees have been around? I mean, they've been standing there watching everything happen.
Oh, totally. I was just reading about this bristlecone pine. They call it Methuselah. And get this, it's almost 5,000 years old. That's way before the pyramids were even built.
That's insane. Imagine if it could talk, right? Think of all the stories it would have. It'd be like a walking history book.
Well, speaking of history, this lesson actually talks about how trees can give us this unique perspective on time. Especially when you think about how humans have changed the environment,
Yeah, that's right. They've been through so much, like ice ages and forest fires and then all the stuff that we do.
Yeah.
But they always seem to bounce back.
It makes you think, even if trees can't talk to us with words, they're definitely sending us messages about the planet.
Totally. They're like these silent watchmen, always keeping an eye on things.
Oh, and it's cool. I was reading about this network of fungi that connects all the trees underground. It's almost like they have their own internet.
Oh yeah, mycorrhiza, right. Isn't that wild? The trees can actually use that network to share resources and warn each other about danger.
Wow, so it really is like an internet for trees.
Kinda, yeah. It just shows you how connected everything is in nature. We might think trees are all separate, but they're all linked together underground.
So like it's not just a bunch of individual trees, it's like a whole community, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the more we learn about those connections, the more we understand how amazing nature really is.
This lesson does a really good job of explaining all of that. And it makes you wonder, what if we could actually understand what the trees are saying?
Well, even though we can't have a conversation with them, we can still pay attention to how they're communicating.
Like, how their leaves change color or the rings inside their trunks.
Right. They're always sending us signals. We just have to learn how to read them.
And the lesson really stresses how important it is to protect forests. Not just for the trees, but for everything that lives there and for the whole planet.
It's true. I mean, think about it. They give us clean air and they help control the climate. And don't forget all the animals that live in forests.
Right. When you take care of trees, you're taking care of everything.
I think this lesson does a really great job of explaining all of that in a way that's interesting and fun. It's not like a lecture or anything.
It definitely makes you think. And it reminds me of how some cultures have always had this deep respect for trees and nature.
Yeah, a lot of cultures see trees as sacred or spiritual.
Like, how some Native American tribes would plant a tree when a baby was born? They saw it as a way of connecting that child to nature.
It's a beautiful tradition. It shows that our connection with nature goes beyond just the physical stuff. It's about something deeper.
Makes you wonder what they'd tell us if we could actually sit down and have a chat with them.
I think it would be amazing. Imagine all they could teach us about resilience, about adapting to change, about how we're all connected.
I've always been kind of fascinated by those giant trees like the redwoods and sequoias. They live for hundreds, even thousands of years. They must have seen so much.
Yeah, I know what you mean. They've seen civilizations come and go. They've survived all kinds of natural disasters. They've seen the world change in ways we can't even imagine.
It really makes you think about your own place in the world, doesn't it?
It does. We're just a small part of something much bigger.
So going back to this English lesson we've been talking about, what do you think is the biggest thing listeners should take away from it?
I think the biggest thing is that it gets you to see trees differently. Not just as these big plants, but as living beings with their own stories to tell.
It's like that saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now.
That's a good one. It's never too late to start appreciating trees and learning from them.
Even if we can't actually talk to trees, we can still learn how to take better care of them.
Exactly. And we can appreciate how important they are for the whole planet.
So to wrap things up, I think this deep dive has really shown us that there's so much more to trees than meets the eye.
Yeah, it's like opening up a whole new world.
And maybe if we listen closely enough, we'll start to hear what the trees have been trying to tell us all along.
Who knows? Maybe they've got all the answers.
Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.